Hi, and welcome to Culturama. Hear ye, hear ye. We're ringing the bell because we have some very special guests in the person of Phyllis Harmon and Joseph Anthony. And in the spirit, literally the spirit, of the holiday season, with Halloween on the horizon and all the ghost writers out there forming into skeleton crews, and you might know a son of a witch or whatever out there, we're going to entertain you today. And the topic is spooky stories for the holidays. So it'll be trick and treatment for you. Anyway, let's say hi to Phyllis. And she's wearing her mystical amulet down there.
I am wearing that today. Hopefully it'll bring in good vibes into the studio.
And Joe Anthony.
Thank you.
And you belong to the Story Masters Toastmasters Club, which meets in Portland?
It meets in Beaverton at the St. Vincent's Hospital.
Okay. So rather than going to the emergency room, just stop in to a Toastmasters Story Masters meeting. What day and what time?
Thursdays at 6:30 p.m.
Okay. By that time, you should be able to deviate around all the traffic in I-5, which is pretty copious these days.
Boy, isn't that true.
That's because probably the prices of gasoline has gone down, and the enthusiasm of the still not too rainy weather has ascended. Okay. I'm going to approach today's show in a different way. I'll start with Joe. Joe, when you were a little kid once upon a time, you probably did some trick-or-treating around your neighborhood in Portland. Could you share with us some of the costumes you wore and who you portrayed way back then?
Back as a young Joe, the costumes I wore leaned toward the scary.
Mm-hmm.
See, I like to be the monster when I was a child, mostly because that gives you the opportunity to reach out and scare your parents, especially if they're not looking. And I would go as a vampire. My aunt was very good at makeup, and she would give me the widow's peak, the sharp fangs, the very ferocious look. At least that's how I felt. I didn't realize until later, looking at my albums, that I was not quite as ferocious as I seemed to embody. The spirit was there, but the face was not. Okay. So, chubby cheeks does not a good vampire make.
You well-fed vampire.
Yes.
Right?
That's right. You've sucked a lot of blood in your time. Maybe you have a special pipeline to the phlebotomist. I think that's the fancy word they use for those who take the blood out there. I call them Draculologist 101. But they always laugh when I tease them that way. And I get my share of blood to check on the cholesterol stuff.
Well, yeah.
But, okay, what did you go as, Phyllis?
Well, my mom always thought that I should be a little princess.
Mm.
I wore a lot of bustles and back ends and long flowing robes, which I could never keep up. I didn't have the shape as a little kid to keep anything up, so my pillows kept slipping down to my knees, and I spent the whole night going like this. After a while,
all life is adjustment.
It was very much the adjustment. Yes, that's true.
Good. Would you tell us a little bit, since you're probably as knowledgeable, what does Story Masters do? What's the club theme all about?
I'm going to leave that to our story master. Joe, why don't you talk about
it? Tell us. Reveal, disclose.
Story Masters is all about getting people who would normally be going to the hospital to ignore that bloody nose and come in and tell us a story. We actually got started because most of our members wanted to get better at the craft of constructing a story, following the story arc, getting a hero's journey going, basically turning their own stories and life lessons into easy, palatable 7-minute sessions where they could explain what happened and who was the protagonist and follow the traditional story arc. And that's what we work on. Every week we run through a couple of speeches. We try to give them advice on how they could better craft it and what they could do to make it look like a traditional story.
Have you ever thought of doing a TV show that epitomizes some of the stories told and bring a camera in and have it recycled on the air like we're doing here today?
Never considered it. In fact, going in front of television, I assumed it would involve pitchforks and torches afterward, with me fleeing into the distance. But
be a hot time in the old town tonight, is when devil said to the other.
I think that it would make a great open house, though, is to be able to do that, is to call in someone outside of the club who's really good. We had Randy Harvey,
Yes.
which is the
2004 champion of public speaking.
no, that's Ryan Avery, but I think Randy was 1999 world champion of public speaking, and he came in. He's actually a member of the club, one of the charter
I know
members.
Randy.
He came in and gave us the first chapter of his brand new book. Did very well.
I thought
So
so.
it was a lot of fun. I could see us doing an open house and bringing in someone from, what's that writers group you're a member of? Willamette Writers?
Yes, Willamette Writers.
Oh.
And actually doing a full show like that. That would be a lot of fun.
And you might bring in some writers from your local library or whatever to get some ideas for writing their own mystery stories. Okay. I'm going to ask you to give us, I'll ask both of you. We'll start with Joe. Give us a sample scary, spooky story so that our audience will be shivering and their spines will be tingling, etc.
One of my favorite scary stories lies in the realm of reality. There was a gunfighter / train robber named Elmer McCurdy. And at some point, someone found Elmer, and this was back in 1977, at a haunted house, and he had been deceased for a good 50 or 60 years. And it was during the filming of $6 Million Man, a show, and somebody was brushing their mummy to make sure that it glistened in the light, and an arm broke off. And they looked at it and they thought, well, look at that, there's bone and muscle. Somebody was very, very good at making a mummy. Oh, and look, there's tissue. And turns out it was the train robber. He had passed away during a gunfight, which natural causes if you have a bullet lodged in you is to pass away. And after robbing $46 and 2 jugs of whiskey and holding up in a barn, met his end. And the coroner / undertaker embalmed him and put him outside his shop and said, anyone that wants to put a nickel in his mouth, go ahead and you can take a picture with the body. And then, of course, Elmer's brothers showed up to claim the body. Was not actually his brothers, carnies. They claimed the body, took them to the carnival, and Elmer went on tour for a much more successful time as a sideshow than he actually did as a train robber.
What a gig.
Yeah.
Wow.
Until he was found. That is my absolute favorite real scary story.
How did you weave it? How did you put it together? What inspired you to go spooky in this way?
Just the real story. It's after reading about train robbers and how they meet their ends, this one stuck out because it had showed up in such a very strange way. In fact, when the paramedics arrived on scene, they had been told there was a case of severe dehydration. A joke on the cast's point of view. I mean, they thought it would be funny to get the coroners out there in that way, and of course they find a mummy that's been long deceased.
So, should we call that Fatal Attraction Part 2?
Yes, that'd be apt enough, I think.
Okay, yes. Good, thank you, Joe. Do you have a spooky story of sorts to share with us, or how do you want to handle it?
Well, I am not a writer, per se.
But you have an
But
imagination.
I have a terrible imagination. I remember, this was a very spooky story for me, and I'll give you the aftermath of seeing it. There was a movie. Do you remember The Blob?
I never saw that. All I saw was the slob, but never the blob.
Oh, there you go. In The Blob, there is a scene where someone's arm is ripped away and it looked like applesauce drained out of it. That so scared me that I wouldn't, in my house we had an L-shaped hallway that was dark. I would not walk down that hallway for months because I was sure that there was a monster at the other end who was going to leak applesauce out and I would be absorbed and become part of the blob.
Wow.
I have never forgotten that. I think I was about 10 years old.
Have you eaten applesauce since then?
I don't care for applesauce.
Applesauceophobia, something new for the nutrition books, if not the psychiatric diagnostic, whatever it's called.
I have too much of an imagination to read too many horror stories. Now, Joe, on the other hand, I think revels in them. Would that be a true statement?
I would say that's true. I think that my favorite fictional story comes from H.P. Lovecraft's The Tomb, in which a young man travels to a tomb and takes a nap. Because it's calm and there aren't a lot of people around. And while he is taking a nap, he finds that he wakes up with memories of things that he never experienced, and he has skills that he shouldn't have. He goes back to his noble's house and sort of demonstrates his new abilities and his ability to woo people and attend court and do all these things that his family hasn't known to do since their noble times. And of course it's revealed that his sleeping in this tomb has been giving him powers of the dead.
Thank you, good. If I may share a little bit, and this is an actual dream I had about 30 or more years ago, but it has a scary upbeat to it. Having grown up in New York, I had my share of subways, and some of the subways are elevated lines. I also survived the blackout of the 1970s, I think it was 75 or 76. And so my dream put those two things together, riding on an elevated subway, and suddenly a blackout occurs. And because of the blackout and the electricity grid going down, the elevated train falls off the pedestal that it's on and down the street. And people, and the lights are all out, and people hear this train roaring down the street and they scream. And they can't get out of the way in time, and the cars and all. And of course the momentum is so much that everything in its path gets swallowed up. People, automobiles, whatever, and stuff. So that was one of my negative scary stories. Now a positive one dealt with a seemingly beautiful trip to a tropical island off Hawaii that was hardly inhabited at all. And in it, we have a little tsunami coming, and it's lapping, and as we see the tsunami come, my girlfriend and I climbing higher and higher and higher to the very peak at the top, not a volcano, but just a peak over there, peekaboo. And so we have the water almost at our heels, coming closer and closer, and just as we get to the top, the tsunami recedes and we're saved by the nick of time. And that's the positive story. So that's my excursion into dreamy, spooky nightmares.
Wow. Wow. Many years ago, when I was a sophomore in high school, and I'm telling you that was many years ago.
We won't ask how many.
I was in a speech contest. It was an interpretive reading. I remember that the story I chose was about a man who was facing death. He was facing death in his dream. And he kept getting closer and closer to the edge of a precipice. And how he kept trying to back away from it. I won 3rd place in the state of Oregon for that story, and I have looked for it since, and I can't find it.
And I bet you your life has been at the edge of a precipice ever since
Oh,
that
pretty
day.
much so, yes, yes, yes.
So that was just what they call coming attractions in the movies.
I guess so.
Tell us about a precipice in life that you faced in real life, Joe.
Well, I came here today to talk about scary stories.
Are you scared of spooky stories?
I am mostly afraid of public speaking, and it's fun to think of how often I will delve into scary stories and read about them and read about scary things in real life, and the one that always tops that is speaking. But as far as scary stories and scary dreams go, I read once that if you have scary dreams, that's just your mind doing you a favor. It's trying to induce an anxiety in you so that you'll be ready for that anxiety in real life. That if you dream about rising waters on a peak or coming back from a precipice and avoiding death, usually that is your mind saying, okay, we might face this one day. Here's how scary it will feel. And then after that, in real life it happens and suddenly it's manageable.
Wow, I like that.
That's a frown upside down on nightmares.
There you
Love
go.
it, love it. Continue. Could you share with us some of the ways in real life that you handle fears that come unexpectedly your way, Joe? What's your formula for gracefully backing out?
Facing fears in real life for me has been a bit of a cheat. See, I know that most people have these fun stories of, oh, I just got up there and I did it, or I told my demons to go away, and I was able to face my fears. Most of mine is understanding that I'm going to be afraid and anxious, and then going to do the absolute scariest thing possible. And the fear never goes away. It's just getting those butterflies to fly in formation, as somebody wiser than myself said.
Subdue the fears.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And what's the Phyllis formula? Sounds like an alliteration.
It really does, doesn't it? For me, facing fear is just stepping into the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Because I realized that once I do that, that what I was fearing was just my head telling me that I was afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I will do a lot of different things that are safe,
Mm-hmm.
but that scare the heck out of me. The one that I have never been able to overcome is my fear of heights. You get me on that precipice, and I will have a panic attack.
Oh boy.
I just, climbing the tower in Astoria, the first time I noticed
Oh,
that I
yes.
had that, the kids are running up and down those iron steps,
So we can't get
and
you to
I
Statue of
just
Liberty.
had to crawl up.
Yes. Okay.
I don't do heights anymore.
Okay. We are not going to have Goliath as your co-guest next
Oh,
week.
good.
Very right. I hear he got stoned. With
Oh, no.
without the inception of marijuana being introduced into our fair state.
Roll on snare drum.
See, that's what happens when you attend too many rock concerts.
No, you guys.
Oh, too much.
Oh,
That's called
guys.
penmanship 101 or the double entendre. Okay, I love to indulge in that, but not everybody in my audience really appreciates that kind of wordplay. They'd rather play with others instead. But anyway, actually, I have been a counselor therapist for a good 30 years of my life, and I've had to deal with people who have fears and all. I don't know very much about hypnosis, but I'll be taking classes Center 50 Plus this week to learn a little bit about it. But do you remember, there's a song in The King and I, but whenever I feel afraid, I hold my head erect and whistle a happy tune so no one will suspect I'm afraid. Make believe you're brave and the trip will take you far, for you may be as brave as you make believe you are. And then